Payne County, Oklahoma. Happy February, one and all.
It is February.
It is February. Let's go.
What about that fake snow day we had last week?
Well, there's been two. I used to be so, in my former life as the president of Bishop Kelly High School, I used to be so good at predicting the weather.
In Tulsa. So I was talking to some of our construction guys, and one of the dudes, I said, why weren't you guys here yesterday? And he said, the highways were frozen in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and Tulsa. Everyone but us.
And we're a desierto, a desert. So we just don't.
Yeah, so the last two Tuesdays, we've shut down, which means like we canceled RCIA. We always have mass. I tell people it's the beauty of having your priest live right across the parking lot. But we canceled, everything else.
Why? You know what? You didn't cancel? The ice melt. You need to put a cancel on that. If we're going to cancel
somebody said, Father, you need some concrete for your salt.
I know. It's like
well, they came and put it down on Monday.
Who did?
We have a little company that comes and does that.
Oh, my gosh. Don't make me get on a rant like you did last week on the reception of Holy Communion.
That wasn't a rant.
Oh,
it was instructive.
No, well, okay.
Are people commenting on it?
A rantive, instructiveness.
It was not a rant.
What was it? What was it then?
It was an instruction.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
It was a discourse.
A
dialogue.
An apologia.
It was a speech.
Did people change their ways?
I have no idea. I mean,
I gave some personal one-on-one instruction. I just told people, I was like, hey, listen here.
Your tongue is out too far.
Yes. Or you made your hand a slot machine, please. Or you took Jesus instead of received it.
Yeah. Just
it was this teaching on the liturgy.
People have. We've gotten some shout outs.
I got a picture
on the
from
social media, on the Facebooks.
I got a picture
Twitters.
from Mary of Avila.
Yeah,
her and Matt were driving to mass.
I had breakfast with her family yesterday.
What?
Yeah, they're cheating on you.
I don't really care about them anymore. Michael, I care about you. But the other ones, who are they?
We went
I don't
to
even
Just
know.
Waffling, and it was delish.
Because they are waffling.
Shout out to Just Waffling. Okay, so last week we're continuing our walk through the Mass, which I think for us has been a lot of fun. I know I've learned some things. Did you know why we call it ordinary time? Okay,
it's normally. I mean, I think in the old calendar they called it like post Pentecost or post Christmas. Ordinary time, I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Ordinary. So we have some teenagers in our parish. Shout out Tommy Cabine and Ben Wells.
Oh,
they make a little newsletter that they pass out once a month at church called The Good News.
Oh,
and then they have a podcast which is called The Good News Podcast.
Did they get a lot of listeners?
I don't know their listenership. It's about 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, I listen to it every week because I'm their pastor, and I want to both support them and see what's going on.
See what kind of heretical teachings they're giving.
No, well they were talking about like ordinary time, and Tommy goes he says ordinary comes. Oh my gosh, what was it? Now I even forget.
You don't even know.
But I had never heard it. I had never heard that before, which now I can't recall.
Because every Sunday in the church calendar had a name to it, like Quasimodo Sunday.
Like ordinary was like a measurement of time, so it's like the 4th Sunday, the 5th Sunday. I forget. Dang it. All right.
Oh, well, thanks for boring us to tears.
That was super boring. I'm really sorry.
Okay,
so I think
reception of Holy Communion ended.
Are we good there?
So after a person receives Holy Communion, I think this is also, I don't know if we emphasized it last week because I forgot to listen to our podcast, but when you receive Holy Communion,
shaking my head at you.
You have to receive Holy Communion in front of the priest. You can't just, when I was a kid, they would say,
don't step to the side.
Well, I was told when I was a kid. You put Jesus in your hand, and then you step to the left.
And I think that was meant to be like an efficiency thing so that the next person, But I think the day and age in which we live, because I think when we were kids, I mean, I don't really recall, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention, but instances of like the Eucharist being stolen, or desecrated. And really, the first time I'd heard about it was whenever that was, probably 10 years ago now, and over in Oklahoma City.
Oh, the Black Mass.
Yeah, that there were like these like Satanists who had said they were going to like steal a host, and then use it in a
Black Mass.
Yeah, and there was a big, or they did it, and like I don't know, there was a picture of it or something. And anyway, so that was kind of the first where I was like, okay, wow, we really need to be more protective. And then, it's both a good and a bad. It's a good, what I think both of our churches, we try to be very inviting. We encourage non-Catholics to come. And if they just show up on their own, they're not getting instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes they come with a Catholic, but the Catholic isn't instructing them.
Right.
And so at communion, they get up and they get in line and they come forward and they watch the people around them. And then they do what they did. And so what happens is people, receive, and then when they start walking away, and they have the Lord in their hand. And I'm watching, but I'm trained in this, but like as I give communion to the next person, and sometimes I'll stop and I'll just watch the person. And if I don't see them take the host, well, now we've got it, for them.
You got bouncers now?
Well, we got ushers, but our ushers are not standing there watching everyone receive communion.
That would be weird.
But they do that in big cities.
Yeah.
You go to St. Patrick's in New York, there's a guy standing there watching everyone receive communion to make sure. Because there's so many, people just coming in off the street. But you've done it. Like you have to chase people down. And it's really embarrassing. It's really embarrassing to them. But we have to. I'm not going to be like, okay, to save that person from embarrassment, I'm going to then find this host in the pew.
Right. Okay. So the reception of Holy Communion.
So doing it right in front of the minister.
Okay, so one of the interesting things about Satanists and those people who steal hosts, you ready?
They believe in the real presence.
They believe in the real presence. You nailed it. It's like these people believe this is truly Jesus.
Yep.
How?
They don't like him.
They don't like him, and they want to do harm to him.
Yeah. No, it's
but
actually
they believe.
Yeah.
And that's what in this the USCCB is called for this Eucharistic revival.
That's why we're doing this.
That's why we're doing this podcast on this. And that is, what do we do immediately after we receive Jesus? The saints give us all these little moments, like Therese of Lisieux says, take those 5 minutes because the Lord is in your mouth and in your body. Take those 5 minutes immediately after receiving Holy Communion and rest with him.
My mom has had a great insight after her mother died, my grandma, who was one of the first people to encourage me to be a priest. A priest told her, if in the Eucharist, heaven and earth come together, there's this collision, it's said in some of the church documents that, the heaven and earth kiss on the altar, that, you have a loved one in your life that has died and you miss them. And if it's true that the angels and saints, that heaven is present at every Mass, then that person that you miss is kind of with you in a special way. And so after communion, you go to your pew, and it's like a moment where you and your deceased loved one are kind of united in prayer to Jesus. I just love that.
Unless they're in hell. They're not yet. But purgatorially and in heaven, yeah.
My mom is currently like, wait, what? Are you messing with my grandma?
No. I'm just saying.
You don't mess with Peg Lodge.
Miss Lodge from New Hampshire.
She'll come at you from New Hampshire.
Isn't she from New Hampshire?
They're from Boston.
Oh. Who's from Boston?
My grandparents.
Oh.
I did have a grandmother who was from Maine.
That's what I thought.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Germaine. My grandma Germaine. But anyway, it's a nice moment. So what do you do after communion? So one, receive communion in front of the minister. Make your way back to your seat. I would encourage you, that's not, a social hour on your way back to your seat. Don't be waving. You're not looking for, cute boys and cute girls and looking out for your friends and, going, call me later. Okay, no, none of that. Go back to your pew, kneel down, and pray. What are you bringing? What graces do you need for the Lord to provide?
Mm-hmm. And thanking the Lord for that moment.
Yeah, of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Very important.
Well, it's also to rest with Him. There's I think one of the most difficult things about being a priest and celebrating Mass is the time immediately after I receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist, because I do the prayers that are prescribed by the Church, and then I just try to take time and sit with the good God. And just like stand there and like even taste the wine that has become His blood.
Ooh.
And even to digest Him slowly, to consume Him slowly. And just it is a beautiful moment of intimacy with God. And so we should maybe even like start bringing a little prayer to Mass. St. John Vianney has this beautiful prayer that just starts off with, I love you, Lord. The Byzantine Divine Liturgy has this prayer that says, Lord, I do not give you a kiss as did Judas, but like the thief I will confess thee. Remember me, Lord, in your kingdom. Remember me, Master, in my kingdom. Remember me, O Holy One, in that kingdom. The communion of the saints. So I think oftentimes we go back to our pews and what do? We watch other people walk down the aisle.
I think that's the other thing.
And so in this moment, what we should be doing? We should be uniting ourselves because God is united with us. I mean, Maximus the Confessor has that beautiful line. He said, in the original Passover, the blood of the Lamb was painted on the doorposts to give you freedom from slavery to sin and death, and to protect you from evil. Now we Christians have the new blood of the Lamb painted on our doorposts of our mouths.
Oh,
that we are free from slavery to sin.
Wow.
And we are protected from
cool.
the evil one. So there's these little phrases, even like that just says, Lord Jesus, Passover Lamb, protect me and keep me free from sin. Or just,
Jesus, I love you.
Yeah.
Jesus, I love. Jesus, I trust in you. Yeah, whatever's going to kind of keep you focused and, not looking around. That's not the time to go to the bathroom. I mean, unless you really have to go to the bathroom. It's a beautiful time to pray. I love it. I say this to our kids every year at First Communion.
Yeah.
Is I point up at the tabernacle. I say, guys, you see this big gold box right here? Okay, that's the tabernacle. What's inside of the tabernacle? And they all say, Jesus. Except for the really pious kids who say Jesus and they bow their head. Then I say, okay, now after you receive communion, you're going to become one of those.
A saint?
And they're like, what? And I say, when you receive Jesus, you are, as a priest said to me once, you're a living, breathing, walking tabernacle. Uh-huh. I said, now that doesn't mean we don't like genuflect to each other. But when we say, that Jesus is living inside of you, and this is true of any food, right? You eat an apple, then the apple becomes part of you. You digest the apple then nourishes your whole body. And eventually the apple, ceases to be an apple.
Yeah.
But you become you are a Christ bearer.
Yeah.
You have Jesus inside of you.
That's beautiful, man.
And so then don't go out, don't be all going out into the parking lot, cutting people off. Or after Mass is, okay, no, it's after Mass. Let's get together and gossip. No, don't do that. Right? It should fill us with grace and peace and love and joy. And
yeah. I had a student in RCIA who was baptized Catholic and then was coming into the fullness of the church. Never been First Communion, confirmation.
Finishing their sacraments of initiation.
Then him and his fiance were both in the same boat. And so then I did their wedding down in New Braunfels, Texas. And Chris said this beautiful line one day. He was working on his PhD in like animal science.
Oh.
Like something about how cattle process food. And in the middle of RCIA that year, Catholicism 101, when we were talking about the Eucharist, he raised his hand. He goes, Father, I have a question. Yeah, Chris. And Chris said, if what you're saying is true, and this is what we believe as Catholics, then the Eucharist is the only living food that we have to eat. And I was like, wait, what?
Wow.
He said, because
Jesus is alive.
Because it's a living, breathing organism. The host is. Jesus is not dead like all the other foods we eat. He said, you cut broccoli off,
breathing?
The broccoli is dead. You kill a cow.
Breathing?
You kill a cow and you take its meat. That is a dead organism. That these things are not living, breathing organisms anymore. Like, I'm roasting Brussels sprouts. These things are
Those
dead.
Are dead Brussels sprouts.
They're dead. All of it's dead. He said, he goes, so what we believe as Catholics is the only food that we eat that is alive is the Eucharist.
My dad told me one time he went to Japan and there's this dish they serve.
Yeah.
This is to counter your point.
Yeah.
And it's a fish.
Yeah.
And the fish is alive.
Uh-huh.
But they shave off parts of the fish and you eat it while the fish is still alive.
But that meat is dead then.
Oh, the meat is dead. Okay, good point.
I mean, I've eaten goldfish on the dare.
Point, counterpoint.
You ever eaten goldfish before?
The crackers?
No, like real goldfish. They're swimming and you like...
Are you kidding?
Yeah, it was a dare.
What is this, college?
I was like 19 and my buddies were in college. It was a dare.
You ate a live goldfish?
Probably 6 or 7. I didn't eat it. I just swallowed it.
Terrible example for the children.
Gulped it down.
PETA's coming after you, bro.
Oh, they're coming after Japan too.
My dad hasn't been in Japan in years.
Cutting up
okay, yeah. So the idea that, yes, what you have just received is the resurrected, we would say, right? The resurrected body of Jesus. Not dead, but alive.
Yep.
Wow.
He's alive. And that's the way you see him. That's the message on the post-resurrection is they don't say Jesus is dead. They say he's alive. They say, there he is, alive. And even in John chapter 6, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago in Catholicism 101. If you read it in Greek, the language between bios, biological life, and zoe, eternal life, is very clear because Jesus keeps saying, if you want eternal life, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. Why? Because these things are alive. They're alive. They're more alive than anything else on the planet because he is the living God. That's what he says. I am the living bread that's come down from heaven.
Ooh. Jesus is more alive than us?
Yeah, because he's divine.
How is that? Oh, there it is. Okay.
He's divinely alive.
Yeah.
And he's human nature alive. And so in a way you could say like he's more alive than us. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to give us his alivedness. He wants to give us that divine alivedness. I just made that word.
Good Lord, giver of alivedness.
Alivedness.
Wow. All right, so it's a critical time to use that time to pray. Now, sometimes your prayer kind of can get cut short, because when the priest, we'll talk about purifying the vessels here in just a minute.
Oh, okay.
But your time of prayer is like over when the priest says, "Let us pray." Like you'll see sometimes, and it's I'm not like it's. You'll see people like who don't stand because they're not done praying, and I'm like, nah, you should stand.
That was me.
You should stand. And then after Mass, you can,
you can do your own
kneel down
practices
and pray more. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that time then comes to an end when the priest says, "Let us pray." Okay, so now in between the giving of Holy Communion to the people, and then the closing prayer, the prayer after communion,
Uh-huh.
things happen at the altar.
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's a bunch. So when the mass begins, really the altar should be empty. Generally, I mean, it has a corporal or a big, usually an altar cloth. And then maybe a corporal, which is kind of a smaller white square.
Yeah.
There can be candles on the altar. Or, no flowers on the altar.
That's right. Oh, really?
Not allowed. Flowers are not allowed on the altar.
Oh my gosh, I love
this. Is a Father John Grant special.
I
right
did
here.
that. I made some small vases of flowers and put them on there for Easter. That was a couple of years ago.
They're not supposed to be on the altar.
Dude,
and the reason
Jackson
is
just shame looked at me. He's like,
the reason is because we were taught this in seminary. Like the altar is not a place like to put like you're a priest and you have like your what you maybe preached from, or like your glasses.
Oh yeah,
like priests. Like that they're not. Altars are for sacrifices.
That's true.
And so the only thing that goes on the altar, it's why some priests. I mean, I'm not one of them, but it's why some priests won't use, like they use a stand for their missal. Because the missal, some people would say the missal does not belong on the altar.
I made strings that hang mine from the ceiling.
So it won't touch.
And I also made a torso stand, and it hooks to my torso. It's like the same as a selfie stick, and it just holds the
It's
bucket.
like the camera from the kid from Goonies.
That's
Data.
right.
And the camera comes out and it takes a picture.
Okay, so what
only some people get that.
Okay,
reference. So let's talk about the purification of the sacred vessels.
Oh yeah.
Here's what the general instruction says. May I?
Please.
General instruction of the Roman Missal says, after communion, the consecrated bread that remains is to be reserved in the tabernacle. All right? So this is when we say we believe in what we call transubstantiation. The very substance of the bread has changed. So if you go to some other Christian churches, they have what they would call communion. But then what they do, this is the difference between Catholics and other people. What they do after Mass or after their service is they take the bread that they've given as communion and they give it to people to take home.
Or they put it back in a box.
Or they put it back in the box and use it next week. Like not in a sacred way, but just in a. And there's a difference there. There's a belief there, and I may not get this totally right, but that they would say this is really Jesus during the service.
I think that's called consubstantiation.
Consubstantiation, but then when the service is over, it stops being Jesus. We would say, no, no way. So,
poor theology.
The germ says, care should be taken with any fragments remaining on the corporal or in the sacred vessels. So this would be like kind of crumbs or other pieces. Now, why would there be any pieces?
Well, so remember we talked about the fracture,
give
right?
people the inside, baseball.
The fracture, right? There's pieces that are on there from the fracture, right? And then there's just on the paten or even in the ciboriums a little bit of dust, and then sometimes you have some on your fingertips.
On your hands,
on your fingertips.
So what do we do about that?
That's called the ablution prayer. Absolving, but water is they pour water. Sometimes I think they also pour I've seen it in the Tridentine liturgy. They pour wine. Clear Creek Monastery, they pour wine over your fingers and then a little bit of water, and to purify the chalice and purify your fingers.
So we don't pour wine.
We don't pour wine.
But you'll occasionally see either a server could come over and pour water over the fingers of the priest. What we do at St. Francis Xavier, and I think you guys do too, is we have up by the tabernacle.
Oh yeah,
we have a little
ablution
glass.
bowl.
It's a little glass bowl. It's very nice. It's not. It's not. We don't use it for dinner. I mean that's its purpose. And in it has water, and I go up and I dip my fingers in it.
Yeah,
and then that water is changed out on a weekly basis, and that water goes down. The sacrarium, which is a special sink that we have in the sacristy that goes not to the sewer, but directly into the ground.
Yeah.
So you might see that, just what we would call the ablution cup. Okay. Then it says, the deacon returns to the altar with the priest and collects and consumes any fragments. When more of the precious blood remains than was necessary for communion, and if not consumed by the bishop or priest celebrant, the deacon, The deacon standing at the altar immediately and reverently consumes all of the blood of Christ that remains, assisted if the case requires by other deacons and priests. That happens at big masses.
Yeah.
Big ordinations or a big some kind of big celebration thing.
Yeah. Okay.
There could be a lot left over. Okay, so what do we then do? What do we do with the hosts?
Then the hosts go in another ciborium and into the tabernacle.
And back to the tabernacle. So when you walk into a church and you see that red light above the tabernacle, when you go into a church and you genuflect, you're not genuflecting to the altar or to the crucifix. You're genuflecting because the Eucharist is there. And where does that Eucharist come from? It comes from masses that were celebrated over the course of
the tabernacle. I don't know the date of the tabernacle's arrival, but it dates back, I know, at least from architecture to the 200s.
Yeah, I was going to say 3rd century because they realized, that there were people who were unable to come to Sunday Mass, and so they wanted to bring communion to the sick, but then the question was, where do we keep?
Yeah,
I mean, that's where tabernacles first came from.
Yeah, where are tabernacles in the Bible?
All over Exodus.
All over Exodus.
And
what? What was the purpose of them?
Is where God dwelt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we just didn't make these names up. We just took them right out of the Jewish world because that's what's going on in the tabernacle. It's not just a fancy $16,000 gold box. Jesus said, remember that
how much
line?
Tabernacles are?
Remember that line from the Gospel of John where Jesus says, "No one puts the Son of Man in a box," and
we're like,
yeah,
we do.
We do.
All right, then the germ says the sacred
kidding.
vessels are to be purified by the priest, the deacon, or an instituted acolyte.
Oh, yeah.
The chalice and other vessels may be taken to a side table where they are cleansed and arranged in the usual way. Other sacred vessels that held the precious blood are purified in the same way as chalices, provided the remaining consecrated bread has been consumed or reserved, and the remaining precious blood has been consumed. So what we do is on Sunday Masses, we purify after Mass. And that's partially because there's a lot to do there. And so we make sure that all the precious blood has been consumed, and the tabernacle, the hosts go back to the tabernacle, and then the deacon purifies the vessels after the Mass. Do you guys do it after Mass?
I do. I do them right at
there?
Mass. But we don't have, you have like 400 communicants a weekend. And we have you have 400 communicants in each Mass.
Yeah.
And we have 400 total, 400 to 500 total.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple lines here. It says, then the priest may return to the chair if appropriate. A sacred silence may be observed for a while.
Remember Bishop Slattery? Bishop Slattery, man. There was that one time he told us he wanted 2 minutes of silence after communion. Do you remember that? Do you know how long that is? It's so long. So whenever he celebrated the Mass, like at Bishop Kelly or some parish, he would go back to his chair, sit down, and would just sit there.
Wow.
And it got, I don't know. I always admired that. I hesitate to say this out loud. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I sit there for like 20 seconds. And then I'm like, okay, we're ready. That's good. I don't know. But anyway, it does call for some sacred silence. So you don't just like immediately go into it. Okay, so that brings us, maybe next week we can do the prayer after communion and then the final blessing.
Oh, wow.
That'd be awesome. Okay, wow. So the priest goes to the chair, kind of sits down.
Prays for 2 minutes.
Oh, maybe we should, we're going to run out of time, but we should talk about when are the people supposed to sit down?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no one knows. No one knows.
I think that's a big one that maybe we can cover.
Done.
The next time. But anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. We are so excited that you are listening. We're just fired up. We're fired up. Hey, the new defensive coordinator at OSU.
What?
He's going to be a parishioner.
Stop.
Let's go.
Lucky.
It's going to be great. Go Pokes.
Peace.